Our goals for today. So we want to expand your negotiation toolkit. So hopefully one thing today you'll say, oh, okay, that resonates with me. I can amalgamate that into my own negotiation toolkit and use that. We're going to practice and debrief. So I'll talk for a little bit, but then we'll let you guys negotiate. We're going to do a little exercise for some food. Then we're gonna try to tie this back from point to point. And we're gonna talk about general negotiations, but we're gonna constantly sort of tie it back to real estate, since that's what we all hear. And we want to ultimately get you better at negotiations, so you increase your commissions, so you guys come back and you talk and you listen to the AcquaTalk after next about investing your newfound commissions. So that's the goals for today. I'll tell you, my first negotiation, by the way, pretty unsuccessful. I had a great grandfather, and we were fishing in North Carolina at this amazing pond that he had. And he gave me some change, and back then change went a lot longer, and he said, you can go to the store right over there so I can see you, and you can get some food, right? So I was like, great, walked to the store, got it, came back. I said, Granddad, I got candy bars. And he's like, that is awesome, but I'll make you a deal. If I can guess how many candy bars you got with that money, how many that are in your bag, can I have them? And I said, Granddad, if you can guess how many candy bars I have in this bag, I will give you both of them. So the point is, like, maybe I revealed a little bit too much information early on. We'll kind of talk about that today, but let's kind of set the stage here. Why does negotiation matter, right? It matters because Roger Fisher, in today's talk, we'll pull a lot of lessons, and let's give credit where credit's due to Roger Fisher, who founded the Harvard Negotiation Project, and we'll give you his book at the end of this talk called Getting to Yes. And Roger Fisher's famous quote is that conflict is a growth industry. So you see it all around, right? I'm sure you guys, if you turn on the news, my guess is there was more conflict than agreement that was reported this morning, right? In fact, if you look at the 186 countries that the Institute for Economics and Peace studies, only 11 of them aren't actually engaged in an active armed conflict today, right? Out of 186. So conflict really is a growth industry, and not just, if you turn on any cable news, you can see that. I'm sure with your clients, you probably see that as well. So, given that, why does negotiation matter, right? Because conflict is so common these days that problem-solving negotiators create immense value, right? If you are willing to focus on the problem and you can do that effectively, it is incredibly value-added, right? So that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's just set the stage. Generally speaking, I think when people think about negotiators, they think about hard and soft, right? So when they think about a soft negotiator, right, they think about, well, we're friends. The goal is generally agreement. They're trusting. Generally, they make offers, to try to keep the relationship intact. They're kind of soft on people. They're pretty soft on the problem. They are pretty willing to disclose their bottom line, generally. They yield easily. And they stretch for the answer, and their answer is the one that the other side, will accept, right? And then contrast that with what a typical hard negotiator is, right? You guys have all, all seen this. Maybe you that's how you think about yourself. Hard negotiators, they come into this, they think we're adversaries, right? The goal is victory, right? They distrust others, right, generally. They demand concessions as a condition of the relationship, generally, and as a condition of the negotiation continuing. They're hard on the people, generally, and they're also pretty hard on the problem, generally. And they can mislead about the bottom line. They generally apply a pressure, and they're searching for the answer. They're searching for that one answer that their adversary will actually accept, right? So what's the alternative to this, right? And that's what I want to present to you today, maybe a new framework. Don't be either of those, right? Be the best of both, right? So don't be hard or soft. Be soft on people and hard on the problem, right? Be a principled negotiator, right? And you guys, where you are in real estate, you're a repeat negotiator, right? You're negotiating with somebody else, and my guess is you'll be negotiating with that same person in 3 months or 6 months. So you have this myopic negotiation going on, and then you also have a long-term negotiation going on, right? You have to play kind of the short and the long game, in your field. So what does it mean to be sort of a principled negotiator, right? So it's these kind of four things. It's on the people, separate the people from the problem at the outset, right? You can have a very hard negotiation and be friends with someone. You don't have to have ad hominem attacks, and you can be super tough on the problem. You can be unrelenting on the problem and still easy on the person if you do it right, right? The second thing is focus on interest and not positions, right? So what's a position and what's an interest, right? A position is my client only will pay you $1 million. And the other side's position is my client will only accept $2 million. That is a position. If two people are positional, there is no room for the negotiation. But if you search for the underlying interest, right, maybe the underlying interest is my client wants to pay a market price. My client wants to get a market price, right? Then the discussion, there's lots of room, right? Then you're talking about what the market price is. Right? If you start talking about 1 million and 2 million, those are numbers. There is no room in between those two numbers. If you start talking about the market price, there's a lot to discuss, right? So focused on interest, not positions, right? And then options. Very few people take the time to invent options, right? I mean, like in this game that we just played where you basically thought you were arm wrestling, most of you got down, you got ready, and you tried to get your opponent down. If you would have, let's say, if the instructions were, hey, take 2 minutes and think about how you can optimize, the score, my guess is you guys would have done totally different things, right? You would have said, hey, I'll let you win, then you let me win, or you say, I'll maximize, and then I'll divide the points with you. I mean, there's 50 things that you would have come up with. So take time to invent options before you actually decide what to do. And then the last one is, insist that everything be based on some objective standard, right? If you do that generally, then if you do these 4 things, you separate the people from the problem, you focus on the interest and not the positions, if you take time to invent options, and if you insist that you're going to have some objective standard, then generally you get a good result and it's repeatable, right? You can actually do that over and over again with your colleagues, and they're not going to say, I was talking to some people in here before and they're like, look, I won't ever work with this person because they did this to me on this negotiation. I mean, that's not what you want, right? You want something that's repeatable, that's scalable, that's sustainable over a long period of time, right? Some of you have been in real estate 15 years, right? Some of you 1 year, right? So you can't do this for 15 years in an unsustainable way, right? So this is a new framework. So just to put a little bit more detail around it, in software, the participants are friends, and in hardware, they're adversaries. In principled, you're just problem solvers, right? You're separating the people from the problem. And in software, the goal is agreement, and in hardware, the goal is victory. In a principled situation, the goal is just a wise outcome, right? And that may mean no negotiation. That may mean no solution, right, is the wisest outcome in some situations. In a soft negotiator, they're trusting. A hard negotiator is distrusting. But what I would argue to you is you should negotiate independent of trust, right? You should proceed with trust is kind of something that you should think about independently. In a soft, you make offers to cultivate the relationship. In a hard, you demand concessions. But in principle, you separate them, right? You're not talking about your relationship. Your relationship is something totally different. Who you are as people is great, and you're always going to be that way. In a soft relationship, you can change your positions easily. In a hard relationship, you dig into your position. But in principles, you don't even think about the position, right? You separate the positions from the interest, right? And you start talking about what people really care about underneath. Right? So that's generally, I think a really important point that we'll come back to. In a soft negotiation, you're soft on the people, soft on the problem. Hard, you're hard on the people, hard on the problem. But what I'm suggesting to you is be soft on the people and very hard on the problem, right? And in a soft relationship, you generally disclose your bottom line, like I did with my grandfather, right? I'll give you both of them. In a hard one, you mislead about your bottom line. In a principled negotiation, don't even come in with a bottom line. Come in with something we're going to talk about later called a BATNA. Okay. In a soft negotiation, yield easily. In a hard negotiation, apply pressure. But in a principled negotiation, reason and be open to reason. I mean, listen to that. And in a soft solution, you're searching for answers, the one that the other guy's going to accept. In a hard one, you're trying to find that one that you can drive them to accept. In a principled one, you just develop multiple options to start with, right? And then you can choose among them. And on a soft, you're going to insist on agreement. In a hard, you're going to insist on your position. But in a principled, you're going to insist on objective criteria. So this is kind of a new framework for you guys to think about, right? And it can be done. Sometimes it's not done great, right? My first job out of school was at a firm called Cravath, Swaine, and Moore. And the most senior person in the firm, who I was, I guess, spending the summer with and shadowing. His name was Melvin Bedrick. And Melvin had 25 copies of Getting to Yes in the back of his desk. And I was like, man, Mr. Bedrick, you must really believe in this and the Harvard Negotiation Project. And Melvin was a Yale guy, and it was kind of suspicious that he would believe in it. And he's like, Johnathan, I feel like if I give this book to everybody that I negotiate with, I get a much better outcome if they follow the book, right? And what he was saying is that, people have problems. They have a problem being soft and hard at the same time, right? But if you practice and you get good at this, you'll get much better solutions and it'll be much more sustainable over time. So that's the framework that I want to suggest to you guys today, to be principled negotiators. But of course, if I'm you and I'm saying there, I'm saying, well, look, what if the other side has more leverage? What if they don't play, that same game, right? What if they use dirty tricks, right? What if I have this bad cop, good cop thing going on? Or what if they're psychologically sticking me in a room with music? Or what if they're, doing all this kind of crazy stuff? Well, we're going to suggest 5 things that you can do, right? So one is know your BATNA. We'll talk about that in a second. Know their BATNA. We'll talk about that in a second. Practice something we call negotiation jiu-jitsu. Insert a third party, and this concept called RRN. Okay, so let's take those one at a time. So what is this strange thing called BATNA, right? So BATNA is a short-term thing that they developed in the negotiation project, and it's called your best alternative to a negotiated solution, right? So, first of all, let's just talk about how you get that, right? And I'm always shocked that people go into situations and negotiations and they have no idea what their alternative is, right? This is like going on a trip with your family and having no idea what the budget is or where you're going. Now you might get to some fantastic, place, but how do you know if you got to some fantastic place that was better than all the others? So how do you do this, right? So you brainstorm, you improve on the most promising things, the most promising outcomes, and then you quantify and you choose. I promise you that in every situation there's a BATNA. People sometimes think I have no choice, I have to get this negotiation done. That is never true, right? There is always an alternative. If you think hard enough about it, there's always an alternative. And a BATNA gives you power to walk, right? In fact, you should judge every single outcome against your alternatives. Right? That's really what you should be doing, right? And the more leverage that the other side has, the more important for you it is to know what your BATNA is, to know what your bottom line is, what your options are, right? This is super important, and we'll talk about that more, but let's put it in a real estate context. So I'm sure you guys have heard this. Okay, so you go to someone's client's house, right? And they say, one family member suggests, hey, we should set a price for $2.4 million. And another family member says, we should get at least $2.6 million. I'm sure you guys have had this conversation. And then a third family member says, that is a steal. Our house is worth at least $2.65 million that we, should have, right? And then all of a sudden, no one disagrees. They all benefit from the higher price. And you have a bottom line that you're going to have to go back and maybe have a negotiation after you had another negotiation to fix that bottom line, right? How many of you have had some conversation like this with a client where they just fix on a bottom line? Right. So I would suggest to you that a much better conversation to have when that comes up is a conversation about their alternatives, right? Hey, okay, what do you want to do if you don't sell this house, right? Are you willing to leave it on the market for 6 months? Quantify what that means, right? A year, what that means. Are you willing to have it leased out, right? What does that mean for them? How much money would come in, right? Are you willing to tear it down and have Sunny Isles rented as a parking lot, right? Are you willing to, carry it? If you lay out those quantifications, that is interesting, right? Because then you've created for them the alternative, right? That's a much better conversation to have, not what's your bottom line. Now, oftentimes then, I'm sure you have this conversation and they say, you know what, it's hard for them. I mean, developing options is hard, right? So you know what most clients say? Well, let's just list it and see what we get, and we'll figure that out later, right? Once we come back, we have to have that discussion, we'll have that discussion, right? So do you guys think that's a good idea or a bad idea, generally, right? I mean, if you want the listing, maybe you do that, it's a practical world, but generally, if you do that, you're negotiating without a target, right? You don't actually know what the family would or would not do, right? So I would suggest to you, instead of letting your clients like think about bottom lines, you should actually change the conversation to this concept of a BATNA. I mean, you don't have to call it that, but what are you really prepared to do if you don't sell it? What are your options, right? And what do those look like if you quantify it versus the price that might come in? So that's one thing, you know your BATNA, but equally important, know what the other side's alternatives are. You don't have this perfectly, right? But you have to think about their range of options, and ultimately it's the best preparation. So I thought I'd give you one story of an immense leveraged negotiation. In 1980, there was a small startup company and there was a big public company, right? The small startup company basically was providing this product to the big public company called DOS, which was, operating system, right? And they had that agreement already. And the public company, who only cared about hardware and that's what they were in, they wanted to ship their products out, right, as fast as they could. But what they realized is they were trying to do a deal with this other group, this other public company, and they could not get them to give them an operating system. At that time, it was called CP-M, right? So, there was their alternative to a transaction was basically to delay shipment. So what the small company that was kind of nimble said is they said, look, why don't we just write it for you? We'll write this little operating system and then we'll give it to you for free. And that way you can do it, and that's kind of part of our relationship. They said, great, because they knew what their other side's BATNA was. And they said, the only one thing we ask is that we can in the future develop that software, right? And that we can sell it to other people, right? And they said, sure, because they didn't care about the software. So that little company, by the way, was Microsoft, right? The big company was IBM, right? And that conversation, that unpowerful, the incredible disproportionately power and leverage in that negotiation, that changed the course of kind of software and technology for the next 20 years, that negotiation, right? So always think about things from the other side's perspective, right? Examine the other side's perspective. If I were to show this picture right here to my wife, and I were to look at it myself, I see a glass of water that would be refreshing and good to drink. My wife will see a circle on a mahogany table, right? So your perspective, really matters in these things. And you have to question the assumptions that you think is true, about the other side. So there's this great place in California called the Salk Institute, and it's named after Jonas Salk. Jonas Salk was the guy who invented the cure for some major vaccines in history, and they've put together this amazing place. It looks like this, and it's just like this amazing concrete artistic place in La Jolla, California. And I was there. We had an investment that we were doing in a biotech firm. I was there with a young analyst, and we were arguing about the pronunciation of La Jolla. Now, for those, the J is silent. I was trying to explain that. But this young whippersnapper right out of school was like, no, Johnathan, it's La Jolla. And so we went back and forth, La Jolla, La Jolla, La Jolla, La Jolla. It was like the tomato, potato, pecan, as my 12-year-old daughters used to say, bologna, bologna. So we could not, I couldn't get them to agree. So finally we said, look, we're going to settle this with a third party. So we went into a local store and we said, look, you went behind the counter for lunch, and we said, look, can you very slowly and articulately pronounce the name of this place for us? And the young man leaned up and he put his shoulders, down, and he said, this is Chipotle, right? And so, the point is, like, you ask a bad question, get a bad response. I mean, question your assumptions, all that good stuff. We all have like assumption inertia. Right, like just an example, right? Answer these questions. Like, just let your mind go and just answer these questions, right? Like, what color is milk? White. What color is a piece of paper? What color is that column? What color is the ceiling? What color is milk? Right, exactly. What do cows drink? Yeah, but many of you said milk, right? So you have this assumption inertia in your mind, right? If I would have just asked you what do cows drink, nobody would have said milk. Right, but if you get going on these things, your mind just kind of works in that way. So question your assumptions. Preparation is paramount, and I thought I'd tell you the story of Terry Neese, by the way. So how many of you have ever seen Price is Right? You guys know Price is Right rules. So you guess, The rule, if you go over, you lose, but the closest person not going over wins, right? Pretty simple. Price is Right has been out there, Bob Barker, and for many years, and then it got taken over by Drew Carey, and you guys know what it is, right? So there was this young person named Terry Neese who was like really quantified, he's a quant guy, and he lived in Las Vegas, and he really loved this idea of like cards and really preparation. So he decided that he would tape for the last 20 years every single Price is Right, and he would put them in a spreadsheet, right? And you know what he found out? He found out that blenders and this and this and this, and he found out that there were patterns, right? He found out that they basically went back every 7 days and recycled the same thing, right? So then he got the price points for all this, and he figured out that they were most closely aligned to what the price points were at a particular retailer. He went there, got that. He figured out that, like, for example, when they give you a trailer for a trip, it's basically based on the lineal footage times $1,000. So he had all these kind of rules in his mind. Bottom line is he went there, he still had to get lucky, he got picked. He went up to the front, they gave him an item, he actually got it to the dollar correct, right? They then took him back for his next prize, you do a couple, he got it to the dollar correct. They went to the second one to the dollar correct. And those of you who have those are all the sort of sub-pinnacle prizes, but the real prize is the showcase showdown on The Price is Right, right? So where the two contestants for the day come together and they present some crazy amalgamation of things. In his case, it was an overseas trip, a 19-foot trailer, and some kitchen items. You have to then do like quick math in your head and suggest a price. He did this based on his spreadsheet, and he guessed $23,743. And Drew Carey opens up the sheet, and the price was $23,743. Drew Carey, instead of being like, man, that was amazing, actually thought there was something, sort of maniacal going on. And so the show kind of went to commercial, basically, and they spent a lot of time trying to figure out what Terry knew, right? They thought maybe there was a recently fired employee who had given him the information. There was an investigation on whether or not there was a scandal with the show. But the bottom line is Terry just over-prepared, right? I mean, he basically had subject matter expertise. So, by the way, if you watch Price is Right today, they've changed the rules now, right? If they do a trailer, they'll throw in like 5 or 6 add-ons where you can't possibly price it, right? Or they'll they'll be very careful with algorithms not to pattern the same thing. Or they'll go to other retailers or other states where they'll add state taxes. So you can't do what Terry did anymore. So he literally changed the rules by his preparation. But the bottom line is if you know comps, right, better than anybody else, if you know the alternatives, right, then, and you have responses to common questions, you will be successful, right? I guarantee you, if you think about whatever negotiation's coming up, if you were to write down and predict the top 6 objections you're gonna get, I bet you would have them with 90% accuracy, right? And if you take the time to do that, you'll be much more successful. So consider your alternatives, consider their alternatives is the bottom line there. Okay, but what if they just don't play, right? I mean, what if you just have somebody, they're just a hard negotiator, they just keep yelling at you, or they just delay, but they won't engage in any kind of principled way. What do you do, right? Well, there's this concept of jiu-jitsu, right, where you take someone's action and you redirect it, right? You take the energy that's directed at you and you redirect it back in some constructive way, right, against them, right? And this is the idea, the first thing to try, right? So, just don't escalate back and forth, sidestep all the personal stuff, redirect at the merits, at the market value, those kind of things. Don't defend as they would expect, but invite criticism. And restate the idea from their point of view, right? I mean, we was talking to Danielle yesterday, right? There's a book called Getting to Know, right? And it makes a lot of sense, right? Because know is like great progress, right? In the NBA, they say that the playoffs doesn't start until the home team loses a game. In some ways, negotiations don't start until one side says no, right? And when you say no, think about what happens to you psychologically, right? You relax. No is no commitment. You don't have to do anything. You're not suggesting to anybody that you're going to act in a certain way, that you're going to get your client to do something. No is a relief, right? So what happens when people say no? They relax. They're actually easier to brainstorm with at that point, right? Because they're open and they're sort of a little bit more free. And if you restate something from their point of view, it generally is powerful. There's some people out there, and I'm sure you guys have run into them. I was actually talking to someone. They just want you to acknowledge that you have heard them, right? If you actually restate something, I think it's incredibly powerful. If you restate something that someone says to you in your own words, sometimes better than they stated it to you, you generally can get agreement like much more likely, than you otherwise could, right? No is great. I mean, in fact, if someone comes in and they reveal their bottom line, they say, I'll take this. I mean, studies have shown that leads to less agreement, right, than if someone actually says no and you work through it, right? Because you think about it, someone says, this is my bottom line. The other side's like, well, are they being honest or not? Well, I'm going to assume they're not being honest. So maybe it's not their bottom line. And then if that really was their bottom line, they can't move. And so then it looks like there's no back and forth after that point, right? So, try this jiu-jitsu idea, right? I mean, really try to redirect and to go back to the merits, go back to the interest, de-escalate the personal attacks and see if you can make it work. But sometimes you just can't, right? And I would say in that instance, a third party is sometimes good, right? If you can't change the process, if you can't negotiate with them about the process, then sometimes a third party can. Right, so who could that be, right? It could be an arbitrator, it could be a subject matter expert, it could be another friend who you both respect. Sometimes you need to bring that in as a last resort. And then there's this concept called RRN. What if someone is truly playing dirty tricks all the time, right? If you can tell. It's good cop, bad cop, or it's they agree and disagree, or there's false delays, and you just know it's not a serious effort. I would say you have to first of all recognize it, right? That's good cop, bad cop doesn't really work if you recognize it as a strategy, right? Or delays or threats or things like that. If you recognize them, in a lot of ways you disarm them, and then I think you have to raise it with the other side. You have to say, look, that's not how I want to work, to deal in this way. And then you have to negotiate about the process first, and then negotiate on the merits, right? And that's sometimes a very hard thing to do. So, all right, so that's a new framework for you all. But one thing that I have the good fortune to do is every year I teach a class on venture capital and private equity in October. And before we do that, they always remind us to don't talk the whole time, stop and do an exercise, because people learn better from doing. So at this point, I want to stop and I want to divide you basically into two groups. Okay, so let's say everybody from about here over, okay, is going to be one side, and everybody from about here over is going to be another side. Okay, and we're going to do a oogly orange exercise. Okay, and each of you are going to pair up with someone else, and you're going to get a plate with 4 oranges on it. Okay, this side of the room, you guys are going to represent, or you both are going to represent 2 doctors. Okay, Dr. Jones and Dr. Rowland. These are 2 biological research scientists. Okay, and they represent rival pharmaceutical firms. Okay, and they're each seeking to acquire the entire crop of oogly oranges this year. Okay, Dr. Jones, you should know, he needs these oranges because of an outbreak of rhodesian. Rhodesian is a disease contracted by pregnant women, okay, and it causes serious brain, ear, and eye damage to unborn children unless the pregnant mothers are inoculated, and the oogly orange is used to create a synthetic serum that works, and it will inoculate every single mother and eliminate the spread of rhodesian. Okay, so you have a pretty amazing cause there. Dr. Rowland is interested in the oogly orange because there's a leak of nerve gas from an old chemical warfare bomb that was stored in bomb chambers in a small chemical island. Thousands of people will die. Literally, thousands of people die and suffer if you don't take a synthetic chemical gas that can be made from the oogly oranges and insert it into the chamber before it spreads to the coast. Okay? So there are only one person in the world who makes oogly oranges, and his name is Mr. Cardoza, and he is in South Africa, and he has 3,000. That is exactly the number that both of you need. Okay? All right, so with that, so here's how it's going to work. Left side, you represent Dr. Jones. Right side, you represent Dr. Rowland. You're going to get the opportunity to speak to each other right now, right? And you're going to see if you can come up with a proposal before you go to South Africa, South America, to try to purchase the oogly oranges from Mr. Cardoza. Now, there are 4 oranges on the plate. Okay, each orange represents 750 oranges. Okay, in other words, 1/4 of the total orange crop for that year. Okay, so one more thing. You're going to get a series of confidential instructions that we're going to hand out to you. All right, those are not to be shared with the other side. They will tell you what you can pay, what you can do, and give you some more information about why you need it. There's a confidential set of instructions for Dr. Rowland and a confidential set of instructions for Dr. Jones. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to pair up. We're going to give you, let's say, 10 minutes to negotiate the best solution you can. Take the first 3 minutes to read the one-page instruction. This will tell you what you need to know about your side that the other side doesn't know. So you can go anywhere in the sales office you want to go, find a quiet place. You can use all these techniques that we talked about. Then we're going to come back and we're going to see how many oranges you guys have, and maybe you divide them 4-1, 3-2, 2-2. We'll see what you guys do. Okay? So grab a partner, grab those, and then we are going to give you a confidential set of instructions. You go anywhere you want, and we'll meet back here in 10 minutes. Okay. All right. All right. So let's debrief this for a second. Okay. How many of you did not come to an agreement? Everybody came, okay, so one group did not come to an agreement. Okay, now how many of you, of those who reached an agreement to divide the oranges? So do you just, tell me how many of you divided them 2 to 2? 1, 2 to 2. Who else divided them 2 to 2? 2 to 2, okay. Who divided them 3 to 1? 3 to 1 in the back, okay. And who divided them 4 to 1 or 4 to 0?
We did something.
Okay, you did something different. Okay, so if you did something different, don't worry. So for those of you who divided them 2-2, 3-1, 4-1, I assume your negotiation focused on the relative merits of saving moms and their kids versus saving people from a chemical warfare leak. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So how many of you discovered that Dr. Rowland only needs the rind and Dr. Jones only wants the juice? Okay, so that means that you guys you expanded the pie, right, to 6,000 oranges, right? So of those who did that, of those who reached that aha moment, how many of you divided them rind and juice? Okay, so for those of you who did that, and by the way, that is the optimal negotiation outcome, right? You both got what you wanted, right? So how did you figure that out? Because that was not in either one of your, if you read closely, one of you said you needed the juice, one of you said you needed the rind. So how did that happen?
I think conversation. We had a conversation of the time frame. It started with, I need it immediately because this outburst just happened, and when do you need it? And then a conversation of the juice, and then, I just need the peels.
That's how it went. Okay.
We asked questions a lot.
So you ask questions, right? So this, by the way, is the secret to a negotiation, right? To listen, right? So to actually, at some point, not just talk, right, about your position and their position. So if you never get past positions in this, you will invariably divide the number of oranges, right? By the way, that is, for anybody who did that is 90, this group is exceptional. I mean, when we do this at school, 90% of the outcomes are 4-1, 3-1, 2-2, right? And most people are 2-2 because at the end of the day, they say, look, you need them for a good purpose. I need them for a good purpose. Let's save a few moms and let's save a few people in the Southwest Pacific Island. That's basically what most people come to, right? It takes a very quick, discussion to figure out what piece of the orange you actually need. So what this was meant to show is, we talked about this idea about separating the people from the problem, not looking at positions, focusing on underlying interest, and this sort of case is meant to do just that, right? So if you guys want, we don't have any time today, but I have them here. We have 2 real estate cases. If you want to take them and you can do them with your office or whatnot. One involves a buyer and a seller of a house. And you have confidential instructions to both sides, and you have to get out of that, I'll pay $1 million, I'll pay $2 million, kind of, that's the point of that case. And then there is another real estate case that is 2 folks who want to buy a piece of land in between them, right? And so if you want either one of those, I think it's very relevant to what you guys are doing if you want to do some in-house training, and I have those up here for you. But I think today, we're running a little bit late on time because you guys had good negotiations. So let's just wrap up. So in summary, I hope that one of the things you think about is there's a lot more space between yes and no than maybe one thinks, right? In fact, if you get someone to say no, that's a lot, that creates a lot of opening, right? And the key is not to just, and especially in real estate, not to fixate on the positions, especially the opening positions, but look underneath. And then I think because you guys are going to be repeat players, if you can separate people from problems, I think it is immensely helpful because you can renegotiate. People will enjoy working with you. You can, every time, you can say the worst thing on the problem if you compliment the person first. Jewel, you are one of the smartest people that I know, but this is not worth $2 million, right? And if you're willing to do those time and time again, and let me say back to you what you just said to me, you can make a lot of progress. So hopefully you picked one thing up today, and that'll help you add to your negotiation toolkit. And I want to be good stewards of your time, so we'll wrap up there, and then I will see you guys again for. Not the next time, but I think the time after that, Alex, was called How to Invest Your Commissions, which hopefully you'll have some between now and then using these techniques. And we have take-home gift for you today, Getting to Yes from the Harvard Negotiation Project. It basically is everything we just discussed, and so take one of those on your way out, and thank you guys very much for coming. All right.